In our previous episode, we discussed how natural hazards can threaten millions of lives and cause large-scale financial, infrastructure, agriculture and productivity losses that seriously hinder India's overall development. The failure to effectively have in place a system which can respond to these hazards, both natural and man-made, can act as a force multiplier to disrupt economic and social stability. In India, the lack of adequate emergency response protocols and supporting tools, including trauma care, security and safety planning, and disaster reaction drills have all contributed to a state of anarchy in the event of exigency. In this episode of India Risk Report, we look at the need for a centralized command and control system for responding immediately and effectively to disasters and accidents, the need for adequate training of our first responders, and the role of the private sector in augmenting these resources along with the way forward.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and in this episode we are looking at emergency response systems, which include a number of activities that we must prepare to undertake, particularly in the event of emergencies such as bomb threats, explosions, accidents, medical emergencies, and even criminal acts and behavior. Studies have shown that India lacks adequate emergency response mechanisms generally across the board, with very few enterprises or institutions having given it serious thought beyond paying lip service to emergency responses. And such risks put India and the Indian employees at a very negatively high position in the world risk category because of emergency responses. And we have two experts who not only advise the corporate sector but are hands-on players in the subject. We have Colonel Arun Sindhwani, who is the Chief Security Officer of the DLF, a very large real estate entity, a major business house, and they have obviously emergency responses as a key area of your interest, and I'll dwell on that a little further. And we have Kunal Bhogal, Vice President with India for the India Risk Report initiatives of IRIS, which is our knowledge partner for these episodes. I'll go to you, Colonel Saab. Reports and indications are that nearly 48,000 workers die in the country due to occupational accidents. Now, this is very different from accidents which might take place in residential areas, since you also provide a lot of security cover to residences which are part of DLF's portfolio. So, why is it that people constantly keep dying when anybody you talk to in the corporate sector, they turn around and tell you that no, we have mechanisms in place? So, is it that there is an image being portrayed when the reality is very different?
I'll say that when we look at the deaths which are occurring over the construction industry or the industry which is a stabilized industry in terms of the residential or the office complexes, I think the attention is to be given towards the safety. The companies like DLF, their first and the prime motto is safety first, rest of the things can wait. When you look at that, the activity which is there for protecting the people is foremost, and when you are trying to say that, you look at that the people are trained, all the processes are in place, people they work for those processes, they follow that and keep it in the forefront while they do any activity. When we talk of deaths taking place all over the countryside, it could be because of various reasons. The skill is maybe the major part which is missing in there, and some places you find the dedication of the organization rightly brought out by you that it may not be there towards the way it should have been. But I will say in a nutshell that these deaths are most of the time due to negligence, not because of the corporate policies which are not there. The people are trying to enforce the policies, but to the time when you look at these policies to be incorporated, somebody has to take it forward, right from the people who are working and those who are going to work on the concept of taking it forward.
Kunal, I mean, you are a risk assessment expert, and studies have shown, as per a 2016 survey, that 46% of organizations surveyed in India conduct a physical security risk assessment once a year. I think they just want to keep their conscience clear कि हाँ हमने किया है. but 17% conduct it monthly, and only 2% have never conducted a physical security risk assessment. Now, so therefore, 46% claim they have done it, whereas the other extreme is 2% claim they've never done it. Now, so therefore, there is a gap in between of several large percentages which may have also not done it, they were not surveyed. Why is it that we pay such less attention to the risk factor in terms of emergency responses? Because it's not just about making sure that your building is earthquake resistant or that you have a fire exit marked out on some parts of your corridor where you can run out. There are a lot of other risks that go with it. It's basically the safety of the employee, the safety of, let me give you a simple example. Top CEOs love to be seen being driven in expensive cars. Often the cars are driven by drivers who've probably not had a good night's sleep. So therefore, there is a risk involved there. While you're trying to look good, you're being driven by a person who's half a zombie. And what measures would you suggest, keeping all these things in mind, that we need to actually standardize across the country, and organizations like yours, like IRIS, should be able to give out standard SOPs to everybody that, damn it, this is the minimum you need to do to ensure that your investment and the good minds that you have are protected.
So what I'll say to that is, the fact about emergency response and the need for it has to be knitted at the ground level. People have to be educated on a community level. People have to be educated in schools and colleges. That is one. Though a lot of businesses today, by a matter of mandates, are getting these assessments done, but they don't really realize the overall impact that the business would have should something go wrong. There is no one set SOP for any business, right? Every business is different. Their setups are different, so the SOPs obviously have to be different. Their risk exposures are different. They are spread across geographies. Even geographies themselves have different risk exposures. So this is a very collective and it's a very methodological, step to take. And why probably that has not been, largely taken into consideration is simply because of lack of awareness, primarily. And second is, you have to prioritize occupational health and safety. You have to prioritize the welfare of people, and then assets and information in that order. I think this has been very well taken by organizations abroad. In India, a lot of homegrown organizations are now reverting to it. They have made significant investments and efforts to standardize this. But I think there's a huge gap even in the startup, in the startup layer of the corporate society.
Just a quick question to add on to what you're saying. I have seen what works well with corporates and individuals is that your good intentions notwithstanding, but if a certain government mandate comes out that this is a minimum that you need to adopt, failing which your operational license will be taken away, would you think that will make an effect?
I think it should. So you have minimum standards for buildings, for example, right? You need to have minimum standards for emergency preparedness and response, and then also for reaction, right? So I think this, if it is mandated by the government, and it will be much easier for the corporate environment to adopt and make it at the fair play.
Achha, Karl Saab, here's a question which is building related, because I mean DLF is the building giant. Poor land use, indiscriminate approvals for building plans, often in violation of environment and municipal bylaws, the absence of disaster risk assessment and urban design have all resulted in what experts call concentrated concretization. And this in turn has led to a lot of vulnerabilities that have crept in because of this whole concentrated concretization. how would you, in your wisdom, and how as a good practice does the DLF approach this problem and ensure that even in all that, just to give an example, some of the most highly populated cities in the world, I mean New York, Hong Kong and others where the density of population is very high, their emergency response mechanisms are also high. So how do you advise that we should do the same balancing act?
So when we look at, first of all, the violations you have narrated, these are all history. This has not been taken into use right now with any of the, I'll say with a lot of, I'll say the conviction that this has not been adopted anywhere when we violate the norms. Any of the, I'll say the developer or any of the builders or the people who are providing such services, they are trying to be part of the environment, not away from the environment. We have dovetailed the complete activity of environment, keeping the area green, keeping the area buildings green, using the best natural resources to have this thing, recycle the resources which are available there,
so
like
that
water.
is your good model.
Yes.
That is your good model.
Yes.
But when somebody makes a remark like this, I mean, let's face it, in India today, builders are under a lot of pressure and a lot of flack because many of them have not followed even the basic norms. So what I wanted from you is your model and how you advise others that your model could be the most workable model, keeping profit margins in mind and keeping your objectives in mind.
So I'll leave the profit margins to one side before we talk of the rest of the things. The logic behind any activity when anybody is taking the project like that, their aim is to have the best clientele available to them, provide the best facilities. I think nobody constructs with the aim not to just give the basics, they also want to give value added to that. And when you look at that model what DLF has adopted, I am sure the rest of the people are going to adopt that. And there are builders who are doing it, there are builders who are taking it forward that way. And it actually, it supports the society per se in case of providing any emergency responses, providing any kind of a support, providing any kind of a civic amenity, and the government controls over all that activity. I think it is one good model that should be adopted, is that whatever the norms is 1+, and other than norms which you add on to it is your environmental norms when you take in terms of what has been stipulated and what you follow. You should not just go by the bottle line where you have just given certain 5 norms to be followed. I think those are the basic norms. Nobody in the corporate wants to do just the basic norms. They want to add on to those basic norms and go much ahead of that so that you are complied for years to come and you give it to yourself and to the generations to come.
Okay, that's a very novel thought. Let's hope more builders adhere to that. Kunal, use of social media and other imagery, satellite imagery, disaster management modeling, widespread connectivity, etc., could be used effectively in the events of disaster and in the events of spreading awareness about emergency responses. Have you, in your experience, come across companies or cities or townships using the new sets of communication that are available to us effectively?
Absolutely, yes. So emergency response, or shall I say, command and control, is not a new concept. It's been around for a very long time. I remember doing some work for a very large IT company almost about 15 years back when they were setting up a shop here in India, and they wanted emergency response as their first priority. So the logic here is the emergency response is all about communication. You should be able to send across your message, and that message should be well received by people who are affected. The second, you should be able to tell them what is to be done, and you should be able to get to know, have the knowledge that what is happening around. So the new age communication is all about convergence. So social media is a big factor in situation awareness.
Okay, so we'll dwell more on that after break, where we'll also look at public-private partnerships, what can be achieved. At the same time, what are the good practices that are followed abroad as a model that we can consider of incorporating, and most importantly, emergency response mechanisms, what more can be done than what is already being done, but that after a break. Welcome back. We are looking at emergency responses in the event of disasters and other human emergencies and how the industry can cope with it. And we continue to have our two experts with us. Colonel Saab, in terms of emergency response capacity, what role do you feel that the corporate sector needs to play in ensuring that their assets and their employees are given more effective prioritization? Now, you have a dual role to play. In DLF, you have a lot of residents, you are responsible for them also, and you have a large employee workforce. So, let's focus on the employees, because that's really what we are focusing on and the industry part of it. And what steps you'd like to suggest?
I feel that first of all it should be a model where the employees or the people or the clients who are there in your, I'll say, part of the residential complex or part of the office complex or any of the other facilities which has been provided. In that, the partnership model is important in terms of providing any kind of emergency. That when I talk of partnership, I mean when you drill anything, when you practice anything, they should actively participate in. They should understand the genesis behind it. They should take it in such a way that every life saved is a national saving. And because when we look at the practices being carried out, at times you find that the people who are there, they take it as a part of a drill, not as a part of the real exercise, which should be or it could be in reality in some day, which may not or may happen. But once it happens, that is the time you should not be wanting for such exercises. And I feel that the corporate houses have a major role to play when they look at any kind of emergency response because of the number which is there, and secondly the kind of facility which is available to them. I take it that the facilities in terms of I'll say the resources, the enforcement protection or the government support, it should become a kind of a handshake where you look at a classical model which has been developed by UP 100. If you take it, UP 100 is nothing, basically it is a corporate and a government interaction where they have gone together. They have developed a model where the complete UP is provided support in terms of any kind of emergency or any kind of response. When you talk of the employees and the residents, same thing happens in every building, every, I'll say the cluster of building when you take it collectively. When you rehearse as a building first and the cluster second.
Okay, so that's a comprehensive answer. But Kunal, another area, that is, what role does technology have to do in development of robust and information emergency centric response systems? What would you suggest should be a standard usage of systems that should be there? I'll give you an example. There are parts of India where in smaller towns, when smaller companies operate, a big fire brigade vehicle cannot go in. So people have come up with motorcycle mounted emergency fire response systems. So what other technology innovative methods would you like to suggest?
So from a pure play technology standpoint, see, the key thing about emergency is to get the right message, or at least get the right intelligence at the right time. I've seen a lot of large companies today, they send out SMS messages, okay, in case warning people in case they are traveling or in case their building or their office is in an imminent threat. So I think this is something which needs to be more widely adopted amongst corporate India. Secondly, I would say usage of all channels of communication, whether it is news, weather feeds, whether it is social media, anything, all of these are freely available over the internet, and there is enough technology today available to make intelligence out of this and tell the corporate if they're exposed to any kind of a risk.
Coming down to brass tacks, name a few technologies that you would suggest are essentials, because what happens is that everyone says, the corporate sector also has rightfully complained that sab aake gyan baat ke chale jate hain ki aap karo. But what should be the barest minimum benchmark in your view that small and medium enterprises need? Because in my understanding, if small and medium enterprises are hit by an emergency, many of them will collapse and won't bounce back. The Tatas and the House of Tatas were able to bounce back despite that massive attack on the Taj Hotel in 26/11, but everyone's not a Tata.
So basics in place, you should be having a proper incident management system. There should be communication channels wherein you can communicate with law enforcement authorities and emergency response teams. There should be enough QRTs around your facility, around your offices. There should be mutual collaboration between corporate offices as well as the community to be ready for this. Last but not the least, systems today are so intelligent that they will enforce training and orientation as well. I think training and orientation is where all of this starts from, and if the system is today mandating that, why not? I think these are the key essentials for anybody to function for a for an emergency response mechanism.
Colonel Sindhwani, I have noticed that people are generally allergic to rehearsals, but drills and rehearsals have to be carried out. They need to be done in a way that people will find it inconvenient to do it, but the element of surprise is something that they should be able to also do it, that eventually you do it so many times that when the emergency happens, you just know where to queue up, where to move out of, and whether you should use a lift or use the stairs or what all you should do. Now, there is a problem, and there is a problem in the eyes that corporate sector has a problem when engaging with authorities in building emergency response measures. Because at least my understanding is that governmental bodies have so much on their plate, and in India in particular, the government has garnered all the authority for everything. But it's another matter that whether they are collecting taxes endlessly in a township like Gurgaon and they don't spend the money because they don't have projects enough to spend the money, or the files are just catching dust and the authorities have other political priorities to attend to. So how do you do this balancing act between the government's slow-moving, relatively lethargic approach to things and your desire in all good intent to provide citizens who are in your area and in your mandate, and you have large corporate structures, Cyber City being one of them, which is your body under your control. And India is not necessarily a security conscious city. So corporates, if you put them through a fire drill, they'll say, oh, we've lost 1 hour of working time, and I had a conference call with my bosses in the US or whatever. And residents have the same thing, that listen, I've had a long day, why are you ruining my evening by sending me out on a fire drill? So how do you, what diplomatic skills do you need to do this to get it right?
Firstly, I would say that we have realized that once you educate the people for the need, they do reciprocate. And we have found that even the government bodies, they have become part and parcel. When we need the support, when we carry out the drills, there's never a chance they have not responded. In fact, they are also the kind of a first responder when we say that we're carrying out this particular drill, maybe a surprise, maybe a organized, they do reach, we have. And when we have educated the residents, because the global incidents which have been highlighted by the media, that such kind of I'll say emergencies can result into huge human lives and the property. So residents have over a period of time, maybe from the office complex point of view or the I'll say the residences properly, and those people, they cooperate and take it forward as part of their I'll say daily activity in which they are supposed to support that, and they do support that.
Okay, good, good. So Kunal, last question to you. Several countries have put together emergency response mechanisms, region-wise, city-wise, etc. The example is in Philippines, they do an annual earthquake drill, right? Elsewhere in the world, they go through the fire drill on a regular basis. What do you suggest should be a model that we must adopt?
So, there is something called Community Emergency Response Team, CERTs. Right, that is one model which has been very widely accepted around the world, and I think we should definitely look in this direction. Like Colonel Sindhwani said, that once you educate people, they are better, they are responding to this. I think better education, better exposure, that will obviously be a great deal here. The second thing would be putting up the right leadership at a government level, and not totally depending on law enforcement authorities, because anything that goes wrong in our society, or anything happens in any of the offices, by default we call the police. Right.
Or they have created a number now,
right.
112 in India, which is something like the 119 abroad. But anyway, we are very short of time, but yes, two very important points, a community activity, and don't blame it and don't wait for the police or the government to come and bail you out. But some very important points have emerged in our discussions with great clarity, and I wish to thank you both for being part of this show. I'm sure those who are watching will know that at the end of the day, the buck stops with all of us, and there is a need for all of us, regardless of a position that we hold, to be alert to emergencies and to be able to give a willing and a helping hand. Thank you for watching this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.